Welcome to Spiritually Fierce, the podcast. I am your host, Dr. Rikki Jane Adams, principal and founder of the Institute for Intuitive Intelligence and creator of the Spiritually Fierce movement. Spiritually Fierce is not just a phrase, it is a movement of awakening consciousness of which we are all a part, if we want to be. In each episode, we'll explore what it means to be spiritually fierce, how to become it, and why it is the revolution in consciousness that will save the world. Join me and my fierce guests for deep conversations on spirituality beyond the trinkets and superstitions of the new age that will support you to increase your power to serve. Welcome back, everyone, to Spiritually Fierce, the podcast, season 2, and we are talking about difficult spiritual conversations all season. And I'm so honored to have a woman who's been on my radar for a really long time, but came front and center to my attention recently. And I was so excited when she agreed to come and hang out with me all the way from her home in Spain. I'll tell you a little bit about our guest, Jolinda Johnson is an award-winning certified life coach and holistic health coach who specializes in burnout and perimenopause. She's obsessed with helping changemakers and revolutionaries get back their spark so that they can go set the world on fire. She wants to change the narrative around perimenopause and give attention to the voices that are typically left out of the conversation, including BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, and people under 45. That's really interesting to me because I'm 44 and I think I'm in perimenopause, but my doctor doesn't agree. But anyway, we're going to talk about that together in a little while. I think getting that information is really hard. So she is a sought after guest on podcasts, has been featured on the cover of Inspired Coach magazine, such a beautiful cover. It's sad to see that has been retired, but I totally understand. There's only so much that Julie Parker can do. And was the recipient of the Beautiful You Coaching Academy CEO Shine Award in 2021. That's amazing. Such a powerhouse organization and such an incredible global organization as well. So I can only imagine that would have felt very special. She's also taken to the stage as a motivational speaker for other life coaches and can be found on the popular website Healthline. Originally from Detroit, Jolinda earned her BA from Columbia. Oh my goodness. What was that like? We're going to talk about that because I can only imagine what being at a university like that must be. And completed her Masters of Science in Education as part of the NYC Teaching Fellows Program at Pace University. For the last 14 years, she's made her home as a single mother in Barcelona in Spain. Welcome, welcome, welcome. What a beautiful introduction.
Thank you so much for that. Yes. Is that me you're talking about?
I know it's always a little bit like people sit there going either, wow, I'm amazing, or slightly self-conscious. But I think it's like, just appreciate it. Like, look what I've achieved. Look how much I have done with this life. Yeah, beautiful.
And so much more to come.
So much more to come. As we were alluding to prior to jumping on this call, there's big instructions from God or infinite or higher source power, whatever you use it. We'll unpack that as we go along. How you think about spirituality is something I'm very interested in. But I want to begin by asking you to tell me your story. Just starting wherever you want to start. Tell me about you.
Well, as you mentioned in the bio, I was born in Detroit. And the older I get, the more I realize that I really did choose my parents. My mother is white, my father is Black, and they got engaged in 1979 when that was still a really big deal. They met on a Sunday where my father was a property manager for a church and my mother was attending church because hers was closed for remodeling or something like that. And anyway, they met outside and talked right through the service. And 5 days later, he was asking for her hand in marriage.
Oh my
God. Yeah, imagine. They met on a Sunday. They were engaged by the following Saturday.
Wow.
My mother left to go to Eastern Europe for a tour she had planned. So she was gone for over a month, but in 3 months' time, they were married. They've
Goodness.
been together for over 40 years. That
That is an
and I
epic
say that
love story.
story because I was raised by two people who, even though my father, really, I mean, both of them come from fairly conservative households, but especially my father comes from a very conservative household. But both of my parents have a deep faith in God, not religion, but in God.
Okay.
A deep faith in intuition and their own inner wisdom of knowing what feels right and acting on it,
Yeah.
of love in all of its iterations. That's one of the things that I think is so special about my mother is that she never judges love in all of its forms.
Yeah.
She is just the most open-hearted person I have ever known. And that's something that I've come to appreciate more and more when I look at all of the ways that she could have closed herself off.
Yeah.
And including to me, as I work with clients who have some very deep mother wounds.
Yeah.
And, here she has a daughter who has an Ivy League education, who could have gone down a very traditional path of being a lawyer, of being a diplomat, which is what, I was planning way back when. And I have started my own business as a coach who specializes in perimenopause, which is still a very taboo topic, and burnout. And my biggest cheerleader has been my mother, always.
Yeah.
And she's just so proud of every time I decide something for myself, when I give myself that freedom of choice and say, you know what, Mom, this is for me. I can feel it in my bones. She's always there saying, go for it.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible gift that both of them have given me by modeling that behavior throughout my life. So, I was born in Detroit. I moved to New York City when I was 18 to attend Columbia University, which that was, to be honest, it's something that I appreciate, but I also had a lot of guilt about that experience because I didn't choose the typical path after graduating from that school.
Okay.
And I think, something that's not talked a lot about is when, especially as a woman of color, and you're given every opportunity to be the things that are really applauded by society, and instead you follow your own inner compass.
Yeah.
And make completely different choices. And when I moved to Spain, when I was 25, I just, I started my life from zero.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to appreciate all of the things that I've done according to my own intuition and what I knew was right, as opposed to what everyone else expected me to do.
Yeah.
But that has definitely come with a lot of periods, as you can expect, of trial and dissonance and feeling stuck, and having to work through the ego mind and make peace with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, so much in that. And I just really want to, acknowledge how much there is that we could go into and unpack in that. But I know from the outside and what I have certainly read of women of color's experiences, that there is that expectation that you have to not only achieve, but you have to achieve like 10 times higher level than everybody else. And that if you're going to be given those opportunities that come easily to white people, then yes, you should then go on to be like the president's wife, or, you know, as you say, someone who is going to use that responsibility in a certain way. So to, you know, what kind of energy in you do you think is that quality that allowed you to have so much faith in yourself to choose the path less taken?
Well, it's interesting because even before I understood how to work with my body and how to respect my body was giving me very clear signals. And I have an autoimmune disease called ankylosing spondylitis, which is a form of spinal arthritis.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because in traditional Chinese medicine, they say that people with that disease tend to be rigid in their thinking. And when I had that fixed mindset of, okay, I have to be a lawyer, or I have to apply to the State Department. It's interesting because, and I'm just remembering this as I'm talking, but my mom had a friend who was a minister, who visited us for a short time when I was in my last year of university. And she is an empath, highly intuitive. And she said, you know, Jolinda, I know that you are convinced that you're going to pursue diplomacy or international law, or, you know, I had majored in history, minored in Middle Eastern studies,
Yeah.
Arabic, you know, we're talking back in the early 2000s. She said, I don't feel it. I don't see that for you.
Yeah.
But the more years that I pursued that path, or tried to make it work, the more pain and inflammation I experienced.
Wow.
And I'm very careful because everyone has their own path to healing. But in my life personally, there's a huge relationship between my pain levels and my reclaiming of purpose.
Yeah.
Because I really do not have any active symptoms of ankylosing spondylitis currently.
Wow.
And I really do think that a big part of my pain came from trying to fit in to places that were not meant for me.
Yeah.
You know, holding myself to an impossible standard. This is something I talk about with my clients who are high achievers. You know, you know when you can be anything, you know, having the courage to choose the thing that's truly meant for you can feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
When that thing is not held up in such high esteem, you know, and not to say that coaches are held in low esteem, but there's still a lot of like, what is that exactly?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
And I decided, well, you know, that's up to me.
Yeah.
That's up to me to show people what a coach is and the power of coaching and my integrity. You know, it's up to me to claim my purpose and to shine my light and really walk that path, and especially of Priestess as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's another thing that was revealed to me back in 2018. Oh, okay. So in addition to being a coach, I now have the Priestess path.
Yeah.
But again, going back to the body, it's something that I felt in my heart, in my bones. And the first time I heard the word priestess was actually from Julie Parker, who you mentioned earlier. And I was listening to a podcast interview of hers, and I had to stop and sit down.
Yeah.
it was like this bolt of lightning, like, and I was just like, what? And I just heard this voice saying, pay attention, pay attention.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of that journey. And so, as terrifying as it can be sometimes, it's very liberating to realize that, wow, if we just really tune in to ourselves, respect the signals from our bodies, create that intentional space and time to connect with source, that even when it doesn't make sense to the ego mind, we really are being guided towards what's meant for us.
Yes, I love that. And the body is the technology of the intuition, right? It's talking to us if we choose to listen. I would love
Yeah.
to know how you ended up doing the work that you're doing now. You've mentioned a little bit about the when that priestess energy grabbed you, but how did you move from, okay, I'm going to pursue a career in diplomacy and take on that role, to actually I'm going to coach high achievers who are in burnout or looking at that perimenopause space? How did we arrive here?
Yeah. So in 2008, I moved to Spain as part of a program through the International Council of Cultural Exchange, I think it's called. And I was meant to design a bilingual program at a school in southern Spain. And the plan was to move to Spain for a year, go back, apply to the Foreign Service. But when I moved to Spain, although it was a fairly traumatic year, and it was definitely the worst year of my anorexia, which I've been in recovery for the last 12 years. It was the first time when I was free, where I felt free, where no one knew who I was.
Yeah.
And even though I lived in New York City, where I definitely was anonymous, when I was in Spain, no one put me in a box.
Yeah.
Other than American. When I lived in the States, everyone was always obsessed with, what are you?
Mm-hmm.
Is that your real mom?
Yeah.
Were you adopted? All of that stuff. And it was the first time I realized, oh, okay, like I could actually create a new identity, a completely new identity.
Yeah.
And I decided to stay in Spain. I was hired by a school in Barcelona, and I changed my plans, and I decided to then add on another year. That's what I thought. I would add on another year. And to be honest, those years of teaching were difficult for me because I knew I was in the waiting room.
Yeah.
It's like I knew that I had to be in Spain for whatever reason, because it's a country I hadn't even been to.
Yeah.
I laugh now because I had a conversation with my ex-boyfriend from college back in 2007. And I said, I think I'm thinking of living abroad. He said, have you ever considered Barcelona? And I was like, I've never been to Barcelona, but look where I am now. It's just these little breadcrumbs. They just, when you look at them in hindsight, are just so amusing. But I was in the waiting room. Being a teacher, I knew was not my purpose. It was just something I did really well. It was something I did well. It's something that allowed me to stay here legally, which is also a big deal. But it was also painful. And I thought, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing? I don't want to go back to the States. I don't want to pursue that path that I thought, was for me. Maybe something with nutrition. But when I looked into being a nutritionist, I thought, I don't really see myself sitting with people and counseling them on calories and meal plans, and that doesn't bring me joy. But I had a lot of knowledge around food as a result of, unfortunately, as a result of my disordered eating. I was always researching, like, what effect does this have? What effect does that have? And so I decided to enroll in the Institute of Integrative Nutrition back in 2012 and do the Holistic Health Coach program. And that's where I I really healed a lot of my own issues with food, and became inspired to talk about it in a whole new way. Also, interestingly, I was following a vegan diet at that point and thought that that was the best way of eating, the only way of eating. And it's in that year that I was diagnosed with my autoimmune disease and realized that my way of eating was actually adding to my inflammation, and my pain, which totally blew my mind, because I thought, okay, wow. So that's why in my work, the work I do now, when I have people who say, well, there's this is the only way that I can eat, or I know that this is you know, what everyone says I should be doing, but I just feel so awful. It's like, okay. It's very interesting how we give so much power to things that we've read, as opposed to the messages of our bodies. Right. And that was really hard for me to, it was the first time where I really had to say, oh, okay, yeah, I guess everything I've learned isn't what I should be following. It's what my body actually needs. So I started with holistic health coaching, but I wasn't ready to start my own business. And it wasn't until I did the Beautiful You program, which we mentioned in the intro. And that was in my, that was when my son was 2. Yeah. In 2016, I enrolled. And that's when I really found, because I had given away a lot of my power in those early years of living in Spain and being, I met my ex-husband shortly after, and he was the hero. He swooped in and made all these things that I convinced myself I couldn't figure out myself. He made them very easy. And when we had our son, his idea was for me to stay home and for him to devote himself to his business, which he did. But that left me on my own from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 p.m. with a baby in a foreign country and figuring all of this stuff out for the first time while my mom was battling breast cancer. So that really got me in touch with my power again, and realizing, oh, okay, I actually can figure things out. I don't have to live in this illusion that I'm incapable of anything, really, because I've gotten through this incredibly difficult situation on my own. And I'm looking back, that's one of the things, and if we talk about perimenopause later, it's one of the things that does come up for me, is that I have no desire to have any more children. But I wish I could have gone through those early years of mothering with a supportive partner, with someone who really wanted to witness me as a mother and hold me, in that experience. But everything happened as it's meant to, because that gave me the courage to really put myself out there as an entrepreneur. So after I finished the Beautiful You program, I realized that I wanted to separate and I wanted to start my own business. And that was in the spring of 2017. So 5 years ago. Exactly 5 years ago, because the October cohort just finished. And at that point, I was focused on fertility. I wanted to help women maximize their chances of conception through diet, lifestyle, and mindset. And I remember the first time introducing myself as a fertility coach there's a Columbia Alumni Association here in Barcelona, and everyone is white, male, and in finance or law. In this particular club. And standing up in my floral jumpsuit saying, I'm a fertility coach. And I was really like, what, are you sure you graduated from Columbia? Um, but yeah, that was a very proud moment for me. And so from fertility coaching, this is another, following my intuition once again. I was really good at helping women conceive.
Yeah.
I love calling in babies. That's another
Yeah.
gift that I don't share very much, but
Yeah.
I love calling in babies. And I'm actually working with a client now she's in perimenopause, but also trying to conceive. And the messages that I get from that little soul, it's a beautiful thing, to be able to do. But I didn't want to be part of that world anymore. Yeah. And I also recognized that I didn't want to give the impression that being a mother and having children was the be all and end all of womanhood.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of women coming to me saying, I'm having issues with my period, or I'm having, I'm recognizing these changes in my mood that I've never seen before, or issues with my body, as well as the deeper things like the self-compassion and the boundaries and but I don't want to have kids, so I wouldn't want to work with you. Like, oh, okay. And that's what I realized, like, even though I'm really good at this, it's time to move on.
Yeah.
So then I was a women's health coach for a couple of years. And then I did a program through the Feminist Coach Academy. And I have since become a faculty member, teaching about burnout through an intersectional feminist lens. And that's when I realized it was time to drop gender from my business. Yeah. Because as much as I adore women, if I'm talking about perimenopause, it's not just women who go through perimenopause. And because I am biracial, bisexual, and find myself at like not one or the other, as well as genderqueer. When I say genderqueer, I am open to the exploration of gender in myself. Yeah. I don't have any body dysphoria. I'm fine with she, but I'm also fine with they. Yeah. And doing this work of like, what really is a woman? Yeah. Independent of what I always believed it to be. And so I dropped gender from my business because I thought, if I'm really talking about perimenopause, I don't want anyone thinking that they can't work with me because I'm only talking about women. Yeah. When if they don't identify as that, but they're going through perimenopause, then who do they go to? Yeah. Who do they feel like they can open up to about their experience? Yeah. And that's where we are now. And I love talking about burnout as well. So many of us experience the symptoms of burnout without realizing, especially high achievers. We talk ourselves out of these symptoms over and over again because in the first stage it feels good, like we run on stress. Yeah. And so stress doesn't get our attention, exhaustion does. Yeah. But that exhaustion can, if you're not looking at what's really happening and you don't have a mirror to show you, have you noticed these patterns creeping in? A lot of us are very reluctant to say stop. Yeah. When we run on that sense of achievement and accomplishment and more. But with burnout, if you're not paying attention to the signs, it really can come and get you. Yeah. What feels like out of nowhere. Yeah. And you can't, as much as you want to go forward towards your vision, your body says no. Yeah. Your mind says, your brain, your mind might be telling you stories, but your brain is like, I can't put a sentence together right now. Yeah. So that's where we are. That's where we are now.
I know. I'm like, we need 14 interviews, really. And I'm there's so many things I want to pick up on, but I guess I really want to look at this. Why perimenopause? Why does this work matter? Why do we need a coach to support us through perimenopause? And maybe even what is perimenopause for those, even, those of us who may even be experiencing it, may not have even got a clear understanding of what it is.
Yeah. Well, this is something that I've always, I'll say, disturbed. I'm deeply disturbed by how if you menstruate, you will go through perimenopause, reach menopause.
Yeah.
And yet we don't talk about it. And obviously it's tied to ageism.
Yeah.
It's tied to the patriarchy and things that are, we're meant to kind of shun. But going back to your original question of what perimenopause is, it actually starts at 35 with the decline in progesterone. But most of us don't experience symptoms until, to be honest, since mood symptoms show up before menstrual cycle symptoms, a lot of people will notice at 37 there's a shift.
Yeah.
But the very earliest change with your menstrual cycle will be if you notice a consistent shortening of the cycle. So if you were always 28 days, it will get to 26. And then you'll be at 26 for a couple of years. That's your new normal. And that's the very first sign of your body saying, I'm changing. Then you go through the middle phase, which is a relative estrogen dominance. Because progesterone continues to decline, estrogen starts fluctuating and surging. So you will most likely notice heavier periods, more PMS symptoms, definitely the mood changes again. So this is where, especially if you already have a history of depression or PMDD or anxiety, you'll notice those symptoms really ramping up. And then once estrogen settles down and it starts declining, that's when we get into the vasomotor symptoms, the hot flashes, the night sweats, the achy joints, the dry skin, the stress incontinence, because our bladder, it has a ton of estrogen receptors. So, if we haven't taken care of our pelvic floor, a lot of us will notice that every time we sneeze, we leak, or every time we laugh, we leak, as a result of that decrease in estrogen. Dry eyes, itchy ears, all of that stuff, and dry vagina. And then when you go 12 months without a period, that's when you can say, okay, I'm officially in menopause. So menopause is one day, it's the day of your last period, but you won't know that until 12 months have passed.
Yeah.
And so this is really a period of 10 to 15 years, this transition.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of saying it starts at 35, because even if you're not noticing symptoms, at least if we say that, women in their mid-30s are like, oh, how can I inform myself? How can I be proactive? A lot of what we experience in our 40s is a result of how we treated our body in our 30s. So if you have it's really supposed to be smooth sailing in your 20s and 30s from a hormonal perspective, So if you already have a hormonal imbalance, then it's only going to get worse during perimenopause.
Yeah.
So it's a really good time to get serious if you're still in your 30s. Okay, so how can I support myself through my diet and my lifestyle, and what's in my power to do? I'm all for being proactive. Same with fertility. When I talked about fertility, it's like you might not want to have a baby until your 30s, but start learning about fertility in your 20s, so that when you finally are at that point, it's not a crisis. It's not a huge overhaul.
Yeah.
It's okay. This is basically what I've been doing. I just need to make a few tweaks.
Yeah. But what you're talking about, my darling, is holistic living, and the majority of the planet don't live holistically, right? Like we literally treat our bodies like however we decide based on our addiction,
Total disconnection.
right? And then, to
Mhm.
live the way you're talking means to be living in a flow state with your body. And as soon as you start talking, I'm like, yeah, of course we have a crisis in understanding around this for women, as well as you say, that absolute rejection of aging, the
Mhm.
absolute terror for I'm going to use the word woman, but
Yeah.
obviously we're talking more intersectionally, but women in particular suffer that terrible sense of guilt for aging in any way. So
Yeah.
I can only imagine it must feel like an uphill battle to get people to have open conversations about something that is admitting that I'm getting older.
Yes. Absolutely. And sometimes I feel like, am I um totally off on this? Like I don't want to, I really avoid using the word crazy, but I mean, it's like, am I just totally, am I missing something? Because for me, it's like, why wouldn't you talk about these things? But there's so much shame.
Yeah.
And for, depending on what your reproductive story was, I mean, perimenopause is also a time of great grief. Um, there's a lot of grief in this transition because we're letting go of things. So, but for women who wanted to be mothers and that didn't come to pass, that adds an extra layer.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so
And we
much.
have to be sensitive of that too.
Yeah. And there's, also like where I live in Melbourne in Australia, I think has one of the oldest first-time mother populations. Women will regularly, like in my community, start having babies in their 40s. And it
Yeah.
is the luck of the draw by then, right? Like if you're lucky, your body will still cooperate. But for many of those women, it becomes a completely traumatizing experience because there is no way their body's going to be able to do what they're asking of it. There's also the
Yeah.
complexity of it for me. I've had severe endometriosis, adenomyosis, PCOS, since my very first period. And at some time, I really felt like I wanted to get to the point where I finally got it all figured out and working before I
Yeah.
moved into this next phase. And that has not happened, right? I'm now
Yeah.
clearly going into perimenopause, despite my gynecologist telling me I'm not. We'll talk about that. But there's a grief there for me in a way that I feel like I never got it right. And even
Mhm.
though everyone in the medical world would say, this is a failure of your body, you can't fix this, I always felt like actually this isn't how it's meant to be. And I feel like I should have had a chance to try to work it out. And now I'm coming out the other
Mhm.
side. So it's so layered. So I can imagine, yeah, the infertility part, the part that, like, if you have disordered cycles, as I've always had, when
Mhm.
do you get a break? There's also that, like,
Yeah.
the way we are taught to believe and think about menstruation is generally not positive anyway, even if we have a regular
Yeah.
kind of cycle. So you're in a big freaking minefield. There's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yes. Well, and thank you for sharing that about yourself, because the world of health and wellness is really steeped in ableism as well. And there's this idea that if you have a condition, then it's up to you to get down to the root and solve it.
Oh, yeah.
And if you have not done that, then you're missing something. You're not making the right choices. If you're not taking the right supplements, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I really want to avoid that as well. We're not all on the same playing field here. Um, we don't all have access to the same foods, quality of foods, the same supplements. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes our bodies, at the end of the day, our bodies are going to do what they're going to do. And it's not our fault. you
Yeah.
know, um, it's not our fault. I always say, I'm not responsible for my ankylosing spondylitis because, I can look back and say, well, if I hadn't gone to such extremes with my eating, because I swung from years of, disordered eating, starving myself, to then binge eating, because I started eating normally. And then when I saw my normal body, when I saw myself at a normal weight, for me, I was obese. Yeah. And so then I just kept eating. I was like, well, I've already destroyed myself. So then I gained 50 pounds. But that created gut dysbiosis. And a lot of autoimmune disease happen when, it's like we have the gene, but certain conditions can turn that on or keep it off.
Yeah.
And so I can look back and say, well, chronic stress, disordered eating, and maybe this is all my fault. But at the end of the day, my body did what it did.
Yeah.
And blaming myself for it is not going to help me in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. So all I can do is be responsible to my condition.
Yeah.
And when I'm responsible to my condition, it's responding to how my body is on any given day and recognizing that I am doing the best I can. And I'm committed to respecting the signals that it's giving.
Yeah.
And tending to it, supporting it, and whatever comes from that is what comes from that.
Yeah. That's such an important reframe, because yes, I've gone in both extremes in my own experience of I failed spiritually because I couldn't cure this spiritually. Therefore, I didn't figure out the message, and therefore I'm a bad spiritual person, right through to, I have to push myself to breaking point to solve this problem. And none of that has helped me. And just hearing you say the words, it's not your fault. Wow, what a weight lifted off my shoulders, because I have carried that, even though I've inherited it. Yes, there is all the, genetic codes in my body. I've got it exactly the same way my mum does. I have carried a sense of guilt that I couldn't solve it. And now it felt like that window was closing, and now I'm moving to the next phase. So what does that mean? But it's a really beautiful thing to hear you reframe that. And also, I talk a lot about this idea of it's the meaning, not the cause. We'll never know exactly why your condition's there. We'll never know exactly why mine is, but what are you going to do with that information now? And for me, as you say, that's been learning to honor resting and, the absolute awareness that our cycle responds. Like, you inherit the period of whatever you've engaged in. You have the kind of for me especially, that kind of immediate feedback loop. If I've pushed myself too hard, if I've eaten the wrong foods, if I've punished myself by working too much, my body will go into a heap when I do have my cycle. Can I ask you personally why that perimenopause space matters? Oh, bless you.
It's, for me, it's like the final frontier. It's the space where, I'm moving into that space, but I also, you need to have a really good understanding of hormones, which that's what I specialized in, as a holistic health coach. But I love it as energetically. I love this time of a person's life from an energetic perspective, because it's when the hormonal veil is being lifted and we have this opportunity to see ourselves differently and reclaim our time and our energy, and also in midlife figure out, like, why am I really here and what is it that I want to do with what I have left. And so, yes, there are the physical symptoms which cannot be, I do not want to put a happy face on those, because they're incredibly disruptive depending on how you're experiencing them, especially because so many workplaces lack a transparent menopause policy. However, it's also this time where you're like, I do not care what people think anymore.
Yeah.
I am going to say what I want to say. I'm going to do what I want to do. If you choose to embrace that energy, it can be a really powerful time. And, you know, I see women who are in their 40s and early 50s, and, you know, they're being very open about their symptoms. However, you also see them doing incredible things because they have all of this wisdom and inner trust and so much evidence of when they have followed their intuition and it's brought them to magical experiences, and all the times when they follow the plan and it crumbled before them, you know. And I think that that's something else that I noticed in myself. It's like, wow, the level of inner trust. And I know that this is just the beginning, because once I get to that final stage of crone, you know, yeah, I really look forward to being in my 60s. You know? I know that I'll be the definition of postmenopausal zest. But if you want to get to that, then perimenopause is your training ground.
Yeah.
You know, okay, am I going to keep pushing myself, or am I going to respect my body? Am I going to believe all the lies we've been told about aging and invisibility, or am I going to see myself for the first time?
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really shifted for me is not doing things that look good, but that feel good.
Yeah.
So even when it comes to how I dress, you know, I know that when I was younger, it was, is this attractive? Is this sexy?
Yeah.
And now I'm like, does this make me feel amazing? Is this in alignment with the energy that I want to transmit? Yeah. And that's really special as well. You know, it's like, this is the fullest expression of who I am at this moment, and what can be better than that? Yeah. So, you know, yes, there's a lot of surrender, there's a lot of grief, and that's why, you know, you asked why a coach, and also why a priestess, you know, because the priestesses are meant to connect you with your own sacred leadership and your intuition and your inner trust, but also to be in the dark with you, to be in those in-between spaces when things are not clear and they feel incredibly uncomfortable, but to hold you in that, yeah, and carry you to the other side. And as a coach, what you just mentioned, you know, my gynecologist, like, I'm not in perimenopause, you're not in perimenopause, but working with a coach, you can, okay, well, let's look at your symptoms, regardless of the label. Let's look at the symptoms you're experiencing and how you can support yourself with diet and lifestyle, and stress is a big one, because anything that you experience in perimenopause is going to be made worse by stress. And a lot of us are so stressed out that we don't even realize we're stressed out.
Yes.
It's just the norm.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate that answer. And there's an archetype that we work with in the Institute as well, which is the marga, who I'm sure you're familiar with, that, you know, who has only come into conversation in the last sort of 40 years or so, or even less, because we haven't had such a nuanced understanding of a woman's life. And I notice even with my students, you know, we work with 13 feminine archetypes. The priestess, of course, is one of them, but there's often a lot of hesitancy to go towards the marga. But we also call her the enchantress, because there's an enchanting energy about a woman who gives no fucks. And that is the energy. We define her as, she's unfuckwithable, because she's not looking for a husband anymore. She doesn't want to get pregnant. She doesn't need you to pay her bills. She's not a child. You know, she's absolutely a woman on her own terms. And I love what you're doing, because you are not only normalizing this or allowing it to be actually quite something special that we can nourish and support ourselves through, but there's actually structure, scaffolding, and support around it. So it isn't
Yeah.
just a matter of a medical intervention approach, but actually we can work spiritually, we can work emotionally, we can work through, what's the potential in this situation, not just the deficit of it. So I really love that. And I'm so grateful because, yeah, I'm in this gray zone of knowing I'm in perimenopause, but not like I've still got eggs. So apparently that means I'm not. But yeah, I every
Mm.
night I wake up in a puddle of my own sweat. Like I have a period every 2 weeks. I am like, there's so many things, that are, I'm like, who guides me through this? Because my doctor won't, because I don't
Yeah.
match whatever criteria. So I think what you're doing is just so incredibly vital. And it is that frontier, taboo, marginal, spiritual space, as well as the physical, medical space as well. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to
And
ask.
thank you for
No,
I was just saying thank you for bringing up the marga. I think of her as the sorceress,
yes,
but
perfect.
it's that same magic that you were referring to. Absolutely.
The baby crone. It's like
The baby
you're not
code.
quite there yet, but you can learn from her. So,
Yes.
and it's such a powerful reframe, right? Like it stops us clinging. I'm like you. The thought of going back to my 20s or my 30s is just torture to me. I just think,
Mm.
gosh, I love my life and my sense of self-awareness so much, and every day I get closer to it. I would never
Yeah.
want to go back to that insecurity and that self-doubt and that constant desire to please and impress, especially men, because yeah, some part of me was always motivated by being appealing.
Yeah.
And now it's like, meh, you know.
Yeah.
But it's an addiction, and it's a societal, cultural addiction that I think is really, really taboo. To
Absolutely.
ignoring aging, ignoring wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's I shaved my head last year, February of last year. And because that was something that my higher self had been nudging me to do for quite some time. and but I'll tell you, going from having this full black mane to having, a silver buzz cut, that was the first time I was like, wow, not turning heads anymore. Um, and it was the first time that I did something, going back to what I said earlier, not because of the way it would make me look, but because of the way it would make me feel. And that there's just incredible power in making choices from that place. Because at the end of the day, that's the richness of life, connecting to those core feelings
Yeah.
and desires and treating this as an adventure, as a playground, as a game, in a lot of ways. I often go back to Pima Chodron, and one of the things she says is, when you wake up, remind yourself that this is a great day to die. And that keeps me present as I go through my day, because it might just feel like a day like any other day. But the reality is that at any time, it could be over.
Yeah.
And so I come back to, how am I expressing love? How am I sharing my message? How am I being of service? How am I being compassionate and kind? And one of the things that I have depression, and it took me a really long time to get to the point where I was willing to take medication for it. Because again, I was in that space of, but I have all of these tools. I should be able to fix it. The amount of energy that it was taking me to get to baseline was so extreme. And this is just in the last year, I was like, I can't trust my own mind right now.
Yeah.
And the amount of energy that it's taking me to get to just feeling normal is so extreme that it's taking me away from all these things that I really need, I'm needed for.
Yeah.
But I bring that up because there are days when I notice like, okay, I'm going down again, but I come back to how, if I am hearing that inner critic, that inner critic's getting really loud, and I'm starting to hear these messages about how I'm not enough and blah, blah, blah. How can I show someone else that they're enough?
Yeah.
How can I celebrate someone else? How can I make someone else's day just a little bit brighter? And that's one of the things that also really helps me, lifts my mood, when I take the focus away from me, capital I, and I open myself up as that vessel.
Yeah.
But full disclosure, my medication has also been life-saving, and I stay life-saving for a reason. So if you are listening to this and you're noticing that you're having mood changes that you never did before, be proactive, be your own advocate. Don't accept that, an antidepressant is the answer from the get-go, because hormones have a lot to do with it. And if your doctor's not taking that broad approach of, looking at your other symptoms, but some of us need medication.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in that.
Yeah.
There's no shame in it, because it's one of many ways to support yourself.
Yeah. Yes.
One of many ways to support yourself.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that because I feel like that is, as we're here to talk about difficult spiritual conversations, in the world of spirituality, medication is a,
yeah, it's demonized.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, and I love that you're sharing that. And I've been very open with my journey with anxiety, and I am medicated for anxiety now. And I was, funnily enough, at 37, which, when you mention that age, that's a couple of years after my son was born, but also the year that I started the Institute. And if I hadn't accepted that support, I would never have started my big work. I would never have got on purpose with my mission, because I was eating myself alive. And I speak about it, I write about it, and I share about it because everything is of God. And when we approach everything in that light, then nothing is good or bad except for our attitude towards it. And that absolute holistic, again, that word view, like, I'm not taking that medication in isolation. I'm taking it as part of an entire life commitment to reduce my anxiety so I can be of service in the biggest possible way. And I really honor you for saying that, because it really shits me to tears that by being spiritual, I'm supposed to go against science. I'm supposed to reject reason. I'm supposed to reject things that I have an evidence base, even if it's only my own experience, that are working. So why would I, that to me is religious dogma. That isn't spiritual faith. And I really appreciate having a more nuanced conversation around these things than just this means that and that means that. It doesn't serve us to be polemical in that way in anything. And certainly not when it comes to our mental health. Yeah. So I am going to ask you some personal questions now, just to wrap up our time together, so we can get to know each other and our audience can get to know you on another level. What's something that people misunderstand about you?
I think there are certain people who think that I might be a bit standoffish. In my day-to-day interactions, I'm thinking of parents at my son's school, for example. This is something that I've really had to work at is remaining open, because a lot of times because I'm so highly sensitive, I sometimes put up a wall when I'm out in the world, and that can come off as she thinks she's better than everyone. When really I'm just really scared. So it's taken, that's been a big part of my work, helping, because I was, that's something that didn't come out in the interview, is that I was born with a club foot. So I had trouble walking normally until my last surgery at 11. So I was teased all the time. I was ostracized. And that little Jolinda is still very, in social situations, she really has to be talked off a ledge sometimes. It's like, we are safe. I'm here for you. Like, no one is going to make fun of us. You can be open. You can open your heart. You can be kind. It's okay. But it's amazing those walls that we put up in order to stay safe. So that's probably one of the things that people might misunderstand, think like, she's so, he thinks she's all that, when really I've had to work through so many insecurities, a tremendous amount of insecurities.
What are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? The Circadian Code is the last book that I picked up, which really motivated me to get back into my good sleeping habits.
Going back to our pre-conversation, talking about that makes sense.
When you look at all of the ways that your physical and mental health is affected by a disruption in your circadian rhythm, especially in midlife, when sleep can be interrupted by things like night sweats, you really want to do everything you can to protect your sleep. And so that's really renewed my commitment to practicing good sleep hygiene, setting those boundaries with self of that's it for today, and getting that restful sleep.
Yeah, beautiful. If today was your last day on earth, what would you want us all to know?
Oh, that whoever you are here to be, do whatever you can to be that. And that I did the best I could. I think that's something that I would want my son to know. Thinking of him and the light that he is, he's pure love. And, there are some days where, just the other day, I said, Leonard, I'm sorry that I haven't always been the best mom. And he said, I forgive you, Mama. You are the best mom. You're the best mom for me.
Oh.
And I would just want him to know, I did the best I could. And whoever you want to be, go be it. Don't let anything stop you. Don't let anyone tell you different. Just, you have a unique purpose and a light to shine that no one else can. And that's something that took me way too long to figure out for myself.
Jama, Thank you for such a rich and textured conversation. I feel really humbled by getting to know you better and know more about your journey. And as you say, there's so much that I'm sure we haven't even touched on. I think you have 1,000 books in you, not just one. So I'll be ready to subscribe to that as soon as that comes out. That's got to happen. But I'm really honored, and I'm so grateful that we get to share you with another community, the Spiritually Fierce community. And let's do this again sometime soon.
Oh, I would absolutely love that. Yeah, we didn't even talk about tattoos.
I know, right? And you said you have 10. And there's I saw one on your finger, the Queen.
Yeah.
Love
I've
her.
got a glyph for transformation.
Nice.
I have the Cross of Camargue, faith, hope, and love.
Beautiful.
I've got the Vesica Pisces,
Yeah.
two holes
Yeah, yeah,
coming
yeah.
together to create something new. I've got a bee, which is one of my, there we go.
Oh, she's beautiful.
And on the other side, a butterfly.
Yeah. Oh, gorgeous.
So for me, this is stay focused and stay free.
Yeah.
Um, that I'm kind of obsessed with duality. I've got a tiger here on my arm, which you can't see,
Just have to go take
a
it for us.
serpent on my ribs, and a lotus on my neck.
Amazing.
I believe that's it.
You have to do a body check afterwards. I've got a serpent here on my arm also, who is my enchantress here. So we'll
Mhm.
have to do a whole episode on tattoo and receiving tattoo, because it is for me a very sacred thing, and every tattoo, as yours is symbolic and has purpose. I always get so confused by those places that remove tattoo, and I'm like, why would you ever have committed to that if it was something that you would erase? Like, I just don't get it, because to me everyone is so much part of my body now. It's like saying I'd cut my hand off because I'm done with my hand. I don't
Yeah,
understand it. So yes,
yeah.
let's have a whole conversation on the meaning of all of your tattoos. Thank you everybody for joining us. So much love to you all.